Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Dr. Austin Tam-George joins us next. He's the Executive Director, Center for Communication and Corporate Studies in Lagos. Also, former research consultant for NEPAD in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, looking ahead now, because yes, Mr. Chukwuka just says, look, the team is in place. And so a lot of expectations for this team. You think that, how do you see them fitting in and hitting the ground running, if you could borrow that phraseology again?
Well, I hope they do, because, you know, there's a great deal of disappointment that is taking 5-6 months to set up a team. You know, one would have expected that, given the kind of national emergency literally that we face on almost every sector, the federal government would have just, you know, started job immediately after the swearing in. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. You know, as you know, UNESCO released a report last year suggesting that we have the highest number of children out of school in the world. And one would have expected, you know, that the federal government would act with a great sense of urgency to address this. We haven't seen that yet. We also have the worst infrastructure, the most dangerous roads in Africa for a country that has the kind of resource profile that we have. And so you would expect that we would have a government that deals with these things, you know, expeditiously. We haven't seen that yet. Now that there seems to be crystallizing a cabinet to handle all of these issues on a sector-by-sector basis, it will be interesting to see how they kick in, how this administration kicks in on the issues. We've had a government in the past 6 months or so, but we haven't had an administration. Sometimes we forget the difference. So I think that now that we have a cabinet coming in the next week or so, we ought to deal with these issues a bit more seriously.
But in terms of the kinds of results to expect, yes, there may be quick wins, or how do they call it, low-hanging fruits, but it's a big task, and it will take maybe a little more time, because they've got to go in there, fit in, look at those policies, see how they'll implement it. But people have to, what, wait until that starts coming?
Yeah, but you see, that's the point I made about having a government and yet not having an administration. At the level of government, you are, of course, have people who have been elected into specific positions, and then they fill the federal bureaucracy. So the government is in place. But an administration takes off in practical terms when you have policies of the ruling government being implemented on a sector-by-sector basis in a way that makes a material difference in the lives of the people. Right now, there is no single policy of the APC that has crystallized in the public domain, not to mention actual implementation. So I agree with you that the fact that we've had this kind of 5-6 months of delay means that we've lost ground already in a time that is 4 years old. So the government needs to work. By the way, not just the federal government, even at the state levels.
In fact, let me bring in this part, because when
Yes.
you say that we have a government and not an administration, isn't that a clear indication or an indictment that states have failed, because people live in states?
Yes.
And so if they can't feel the impact of governance at state level,
There's a lethargy. We don't have, you know, a momentum at all. You know, you might find activity, great deal of activity in some states, you know, in Abia, in Kaduna, in Rivers, but the picture generally is very depressing. We would have expected that this is a government that will come and say, look, we wanted change. Nigerians wanted change. They brought us on a platform of change. And so this is our policy, and this is what we are going to do about it on a sector-by-sector basis. We still have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world, one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world, one of the worst infrastructure in the... So we need an administration that focuses on these things and gets the job of the people done. So far, we don't have that momentum, unfortunately.
If you look at it, let's break it down into quarters, and we just realized that we have 16 quarters in the life of this administration for the first 4 years, and 5 months is almost 2 quarters gone. And you said they don't have an administration, a clear-cut policy, which a lot of Nigerians are concerned about. With this incoming cabinet, if we were to look at it sectors by sector, where would you love to see? I go back to Chimala's question. some kind of quick wins, because Nigerians are already lamenting and complaining. So if they came on board today, what would you love to see them quickly drive?
You know, there's a lot of discussion about the price of oil falling and rising. I think that the greatest asset that we have is not even oil or gas. It is in the people of this country. If we can immediately have impact in terms of how we reform education, for instance, that would be very important. There are countless reports on how to reform education in this country. As you know, last year there was an education summit. You know, how do we implement those reports? How can we make sure that we have an educational system such that when people leave the universities or leave any center of learning, they are employable or they can create jobs for themselves? We do not have any template. We do not have any response as far as these issues are concerned. Now that the cabinet is coming, you would expect that as soon as the Minister for Education is sworn in, he's going to make sure that these policies see the light of day. These are things that cannot be ignored. We need power in order for the real sector to function. Right now, what we have is a topsy-turvy situation concerning power supply. In an era of change, you want to see practical results in terms of how they're going to turn around the power sector. Are we going to remove the subsidy in the petroleum sector or not? That's an open question.
So that debate is still there. Going back to education and
Yes.
power, recall we just had another summit by the NESG, and we had to go back to talk about the education summit.
Yes.
And it would seem as if every time a summit is over, discussions and solutions to problems brought to the table, we don't get to see implementation. And talking about a graduate or a school leaver who can't even create a job or wealth for himself or herself.
Yeah.
You put that side by side with what the NYC is doing now, talking about skills acquisition for core members, and you go again to the power sector, it comes to information. I'm trying to look at the information that is coming out of this particular government. It would seem as if when such summits are over, we don't get to hear anything from the government or see anything from the government. How can we feel it just in case the government is working towards an outcome of a summit?
What we can do is look at the various reports, the specific points of intervention. Are we going to completely rethink our curriculum? Because a lot of the curriculum appears to be theory-based. How can we make sure that we bring in entrepreneurial skills? How can we make sure that our people have skills in technology, which is the next frontier? How can we make sure that people have skills that can give them jobs rather than waiting for jobs to be created for them? The government has no response to that as I speak. Okay, we need power for those, not just in the big manufacturing sector, but even small and medium scale industries to activate their business practices. We still have a very topsy-turvy power supply, less than 4,000 megawatts for a population of almost 200 million people. This is scandalous, far less than what is consumed in Johannesburg alone. So we have a crisis on nearly every sector. And so to have 5-6 months wasted simply because you're putting a lackluster team together is very disappointing indeed. We believed that now that we wanted change and we've got change, what we wanted was a complete change of trajectory in terms of policy formulation, in terms of policy implementation, in terms of the choice of individuals who lead the vanguard of change. We do not seem to have that momentum yet, unfortunately.
Let me bring this in. Perhaps some in government quarters may have this kind of thinking as well.
Yes.